On page 14, we'll start to look at the steps in learning how to apply leadership principles to achieve a successful family. Today, each new family has a new leader that has to learn new leadership skills. If you are the new leader, who will teach you these skills? The skills, both good and bad, will be taught primarily by the example of the leadership of the family that you grew up in. What do we know about good leadership? Before you can learn leadership, you need to remember what the history books tell us about the Greek philosopher Socrates. He was credited with saying, "One's wisdom is limited to an awareness of one's own ignorance." The question we have to ask ourselves is, what is our awareness of our ignorance when it comes to leadership skills? We find that as we go through life, we go through 4 stages in each learning cycle: unwilling and unable, unable yet willing, able and unwilling, and the 4th stage is able and willing. You need to ask the question, where am I on the learning cycle of life? You may be an adult, that is, over the age of 21, and yet be unable and unwilling to face life and the decisions that one must make in life. Our ability can be charted on what is called a learning curve. Everyone is at a different place on the curve. Those at A1 are unable and unwilling. At level 2, we find unable and willing. Level 3 is able and unwilling. And level 4, that of able and willing. As the leader, where are you on the curve? In the world view, leadership is defined by kings, queens, dictators, emperors, presidents, and business CEOs. Rather than follow the world's view of leadership, what does the Bible say about leadership? In the NIV version of the Bible, there is 236 references to leader. And in the Living Bible, there is 468 references to leader. We find in Matthew 20, verses 25 to 28, Jesus was talking to the disciples about being a leader. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." We saw in the introduction that like Christ, who gave his life for us, we are to do the same. Our attitude should be one of servant rather than king. As a Christian, remember what Galatians 2:20 said, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by the faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." As husbands and fathers, we are to be like Christ and give ourselves to the family. In the introduction to leadership, we introduced the 4 temperaments. A knowledge of all 4 behavior traits is required before you can become an effective leader. You may recall on page 2, we talked about resources and controls and how they were like playing a piano. The same is true in temperaments. Each temperament has a natural talent and can play their piano instinctively. Research studies have found that each person has a primary and secondary temperament. What was also noted is that all 4 temperaments are needed to be a good leader. Therefore, we need to learn how to apply the abilities in the other areas that we do not have a natural talent for. The leader in every situation must have a vision, a goal, or a target to aim at. Once the goal is set, one must first analyze and research what is needed to be done. Next, the leader must develop a plan on how to reach the goal. What skills, what education, or training will be needed in achieving the goal? And finally, what action will be needed to complete the goal? These conditions must all be satisfied if the business or family is to succeed. As the leader of the family, you have the responsibility for making the family successful. There are 4 leadership principles you must keep active at all times. First, have a vision. Second, give clear directions. Third, develop trust. And fourth, build confidence. In addition, there are 4 more areas of leadership that must be observed. First, be fair at all times. Second, do not show partiality. Third, do not give in to fear or pressure from others. And fourth, recognize the limitation of others and yourself. The leader needs to be aware of each family member's position on the learning curve. Proverbs 21:18 tells us that without a vision or goal, the people perish. What will it take to hit your family target? What is your vision? What is your goal? To answer the question, you need to analyze what needs to be done. Vision for the family applies to all members at all levels of learning. And if your primary temperament is melancholy, then you are best at researching and visualizing what needs to be done. One of the negative traits of a melancholy is that they can get caught up in what is called analysis paralysis. That is, never settling on a vision, always doing research. Along with the vision, the leader must develop a plan if the family is to be successful. The phlegmatic temperament has a talent for planning. There is a negative trait in the phlegmatic, and that is procrastination. They can make a great plan, yet never get around to taking action and doing it. Both of these temperaments are considered to be type B personalities. The father needs to provide special care for those who are unable and unwilling. They are the infants of the family or the mentally handicapped. They are below the A1 line and require L1 leadership. Children quickly learn and they move to the second stage from unable and unwilling to unable yet willing. It's sometimes called the terrible two stage, that of, I can do it myself. They lack the ability. But what they lack in ability, they make up for in willingness. At this level, the leadership requires coaching, that of L2. Those with a sanguine temperament have the special skills of teaching and coaching. They have the gift of encouragement. They are people-oriented, and they focus on going over and over a subject until it is perfect. They have the negative trait of being picky. It is our responsibility as leaders to develop their skills through structured and direct supervision. The ability to learn how to take direction and develop discipline at this level will be a key factor in their success in life. It is the leader's responsibility to explain and clarify the what, the when, the where, and the hows. Under L2 leadership, the learning is in a controlled environment, such as a school's classroom. You set the standards and the goals to be met. You do not leave them alone to do it themselves. Then you test to evaluate their level of ability and willingness. In Deuteronomy 6, verse 7, it tells us about teaching the law to the children. It says, "You must teach them to your children and talk about them when you are at home or out for a walk, at bedtime, and the first thing in the morning." We see this command again in Psalm 78. It says, "He decreed statutes for Jacob and established the law in Israel, which he commanded our ancestors to teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children." We read in Proverbs 15, the first part of verse 2. "A wise teacher makes learning a joy." And then in Proverbs 16, verse 21, it tells us, "A pleasant teacher is the best." The question is, as the leader, are you teachable? What do we find in the Bible about being teachable? In Hebrews 5, verse 8, we read, "And even though Jesus was God's Son, he had to learn from experience what it was like to obey, when obeying meant suffering." Jesus modeled a teachable leader. We find 15 verses in Proverbs that talk about teachable. When you are teachable, what is your attitude? Teachable is learning a better way to reach the goal. Teachable creates an environment to allow others to give input and advice. There's a second step in level 2. It deals with developing the skills that the student has learned. It is the coach's responsibility to prepare the team to win. It's the leader's responsibility to prepare members of the family to win. We must work on correcting the mistakes before the game begins. Once the competition begins, you trust your coaching was successful. The fact is that everyone will be tested in life. How well we do will depend on how well we were coached. It requires the leader to encourage skill development. The coach needs to influence and motivate to develop and improve. Then what? Well, it's practice, practice, practice. Do they practice by themselves? No. You need to work with them. And as they develop their skills, you need to reduce your supervision to give them confidence. Confidence that they can do it themselves. Then you reward achievements. At level 2, you must be willing to say no over and over again until they learn to do it correctly. They must learn how to be accountable at this level, or they will not be able to move up the success curve. The child whose primary temperament is choleric will have a difficult time learning to take no for an answer, for they will want to do it their way. Level 2 leadership will influence and set the pattern of life for them. We find these principles in Proverbs. Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. What a person learns between the age of 1 and 10 sets the habit patterns that will stay with them through life. Habits learned during your early years, whether good or bad, are hard to overcome later in life. Lamentations 3, verses 27 to 33 tells us to not discipline your son. It proves you don't love him. For if you love him, you will be prompt to correct him. We've been looking at the leadership qualities for a successful family. The first was to have a vision. Second, give clear directions. On page 15, we'll continue to look at the leadership qualities that of developing trust and building confidence. To view the Notebook on Life series, visit us on the web at www.christianvisualarts.com.